One second. We are now live. Live. Okay. So that's what's going on my end. What about you?
That's similar. I mean, obviously, I'm out of it, but talking to my family about what is happening in Israel. My family is in Israel. You can feel the same. What you mentioned, the kind of like the waiting or this anticipation for not knowing now what, and the trying to figure out what to do, and short term, long term, like how do I operate in this environment. And it's a very much for some people also, like they're struggling with a paradigm shift of the things that happened are like I don't know, so we'll see how.
Well, I think we're still like in the outer rim of like of a black hole. Like we're in the event horizon still. Like we haven't yet we haven't yet like really entered the center. And like I don't know, like as far as like a paradigm shift, like I'm with you. I don't think Israel's ever going to be the same. I still think like we're in the thicket of like, yes, what happened on October 7th, which someone's calling it the Milchemet Hayom HaShmini, the War of the Eighth Day. So it's supposed to be like a continuation of, there was the 6-day war, there was the 7th-day war, which is supposed to be like on Yom Kippur, and then there's the 8th-day war, which is now the Shmini Atzeret, once we left the Sukkah. And this is all like a continuous part of like these like wars, as part of like the story of redemption, quote unquote. So yeah, I think like chapter 1 happened, and really I've been saying that, trying to be optimistic, how chapter 1, if we look at the establishment of the state of Israel, we're on Jacob's channel, Israel and the Zionist movement, where their downfall comes swiftly, and he does not share the same thoughts as I do. But if some see that as Atchalta de Geulta, the beginning steps of the redemption, I would hope this will push start Israel into like a next chapter. We'll see. All right, I see that also the clan of Babylon is here. Hello, sir. It's good to have you over here, and I understand that you were missing from your book club. No,
he was missing. He was very, very much missing, but maybe we will get him back. Who knows? Maybe it will be so interesting that he would not be able to enter.
He's welcome to join as well. And I see Plebis is here as well. Good to see you, sir. I hope you're having a very good day, and everyone in the family is doing well. All right, let's rock and roll. Is this? Can you scroll back for a second? Is this where we stopped? Yeah, this is. No, you're right. This is where we stopped.
I think so. If I can find here's my tab. Yeah, this is where we spoke about the Rabbi Eliezer and the tree.
Right, okay, exactly. We said, just to backtrack for a second, we were talking about how someone is walking down is going on a stroller, he's on his way from someplace to someplace, and he is shoneh. He is memorizing. He's going over the Torah, the studies he knows in his head. And it says umafsik, and he stops and he blesses this tree, and we say he is this is a violation, and he is risking his life doing so. And we obviously, part of what we asked was, this sounds a little curious, because we even know that there's a blessing for a tree, right? So like, why would this be an issue? So there's a hierarchy conversation you could get into about how, like, yes, there's a blessing for a tree, but ultimately, like, if you're studying Torah, that should be the focus. However, we stress the fact that here he says Rav Yaakov's interpretation is umafsik, when he stops. That's the issue. When you sever, when you created, like, even if you're saying one as Torah, you stop, and then the other is Torah, there was that severing that connection. And if you believe it if you see it as one continuous flow, and there's no stopping, then wouldn't necessarily be an issue with then blessing the tree, because you didn't actually distract yourself from Torah. Rather, you recognize that there's even more Torah to be seen around you. I believe, I don't know if I did or didn't mention this last week, but this resonates with, or this correlates with Rav Yaakov's other saying about how basically, if one wants to go, one should imagine his life as a hallway into the next world, and the next world being this great room and palace. And we're seeing over here that there isn't this dichotomy of like outside the palace, inside the palace. Rather, it's a hallway that is a hallway to the great room. And the only way you light up the hallway is via the doors that open up that light it up. So you still don't get the full light from the grand room, but you could still, it's all continuous flow. It's all connected. And hence that kind of mindset sheds light on his attitude over here when he says mafsik.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move into our current one. We're on number 8. Okay, Rabbi Dostai ברבי ינאי משום רבי מאיר. אומר, כל השוכח דבר אחד ממשנתו, מעלה עליו הכתוב כאילו מתחייב בנפשו. Again, with one of these, heavy, intense sentences. שנאמר, רק ישמר לך ושמור נפשך מאוד, פן תשכח את הדברים אשר ראו עיניך. יכול אפילו תקפה עליו משנתו, תלמוד לומר, ופן יסורו מלבבך כל ימי חייך, הוא אינו מתחייב בנפשו עד שישיב ויסירם מליבו. Rabbi Dostai, the son of Rabbi Yanai, would say in the name of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir obviously being his teacher in this case, as we've seen in the past. Anyone who forgets even a single word of learning, the Torah considers it as if he forfeited his life. As it is stated, just be careful and verily guard your soul, lest you forget the things that your eyes have seen. One might think that this applies to one who has forgotten because his studies proven too difficult for him. But the verse goes on to tell us, unless they be removed from your heart throughout the days of your life. Hence, one does not forfeit his life unless he deliberately removes them from his heart. All right. So, Rabbi Dostai, just in general, we do our little context over here. So he, as we say, he's a student of Reb Meir. He makes his way down to Babylon over the period. That's where he's hanging out most of the time. Famously, he gets into trouble over there with some made men. Well, they're part of I don't know if they're part of the empire there or part of the ruling class. Either way, they're made men, and he's there with a partner of his, and they renege on some sort of deal. Not Rabbi Dostai, but his partner reneges. The made men renege on a deal, and his friend doesn't want to give up. And ultimately, Rav Dostai even tells these made men that they should have this guy arrested, basically, or beat him, because ultimately, when they come back and they tell the story to their rabbi, Rav Dostai, his study partner, they go to the rabbi, to Rav Meir. Rav Meir agrees with Rav Dostai because he explains how ultimately he was doing it for his friends' benefit, because he realized that these were made men, and he figured that if his friend wouldn't stop pestering them about it, they would ultimately kill him. So he said, let them just beat him and get this over with, and we don't have deals anymore. But I guess it's a sort of tough love from a friend of yours. He was also known, there's not a lot of halachot we know from him, but we know that he was big on teaching on the nature of men and women, like the modern love languages, so to speak. Mm-hmm. He was there giving them some ideas. So כל השוכח דבר ממשנתו מעלה עליו הכתוב כאילו מתחייב בנפשו. So we look at this as just as classic as someone's forgetting what he learned, right? So clearly there's a focus over here of it not being like a priority of what he should be studying, and it's also setting you up in a sense where if you're forgetting your Mishnah, not only your actual Mishnah like we're learning right now, but rather if you're forgetting this whole outlook in a certain sense. If you're removing yourself from understanding how to discern between right and wrong, if you're using your Mishnah to now use as your Oculus, as we've said in the past, to use that to discern, you're going to end up getting very confused and not recognizing anymore between what's holy and what's unholy, what's good and what's not good. So it's the stress of making sure that you are constantly engaging not only in one specific Mishnah, but more in the continuous mode of this embodied Torah that you have.
So
And
why does it say davar? Why does it say one? They say word or thing, or like why does it say so specifically? Like so in such like even this amount.
yeah,
Instead of like why not the like you mentioned like a whole perspective.
Right. So the reason they're saying one over here, it's a great question, is because ultimately this is the attitude, which is so we learn that when God was talking to Moses and Moses wanted to hear the Torah, God said one word basically. But Moses said, like, I didn't comprehend. So then there was a breakdown to the 10 commandments, basically. Mm-hmm. And then we also know that those 10 commandments that were told to the people of Israel, they only heard 2 sentences and they said, stop. And really what was being told over there was the entirety of the Torah. Obviously, some people might agree with me. I don't think that means every single thing that was going to be written. Rather, like we know that famous Gemara that we discussed that when Moses asks from God, God takes Moses and takes him into the study hall of Rabbi Akiva. Generations in the future, mm-hmm. Rabbi Akiva is explaining something. Moses is sitting on the back row, the 7th row, and he doesn't understand. And he gets very concerned. And his concern is, some people look at it because he's concerned, like, how do I not understand? Like, Moses is great. How do I not understand? Because ultimately, at the end of that story, they ask Rabbi Akiva, where does he know this from? The thing that Moses doesn't understand. And Rabbi Akiva says, we know this from Moshe Torah Messina. We know this from Moses, from the lessons we learned from Moses. And then Moses feels happy. The reason he feels happy, not because his name was mentioned, rather because he recognizes that these branches that I'm not aware of all come from the one seed. So here too, the word is echad memishnato, because ultimately, if you are learning your Torah as specific individuals, like these are all disconnected pieces. Today I learned Mishnah, tomorrow I'm learning Bible. Then you have an issue if you're forgetting one because you're not seeing how they're really actually all interconnected as one big piece. You could say over here that actually means that it's sort of like the reverse. If the only thing you really forgot was one line, then it's not a big deal because you're still connected, like we said earlier with Rabbi Akiva, you're still connected to the full flow. But if you see these things as not interconnected, then that one thing you forgot is a big deal.
Right. So yeah, if you lose the fact that the whole Mishnah is davar echad, or there's some unity to it, then there is going to be a certain effect to that, or an impact.
Well, you have in the blessings in the morning, we say Baruch She'amar V'Haya Ha'olam. Blessed he who spoke and the world was created, right? And that's just like b'ma'amar echad, with one word, and you have sort of like we spoke about this, how the letter Yud, right, shows, and last time we were talking about 10, how it's multiplicity, but like in unity, right, in one singular dot. There's this obviously relates when we're talking about the flow, which connects to in Kabbalah you have like a divine memory, like a zikaron el, but there's a sense where there is all the Torah is part of some larger divine cloud that we have. That, and if you are not remembering, you are recognizing that you're being severed from that cloud. And it's like a focus how you should always be creating hotspots of yourself, basically, and making sure you are constantly being connected to that divine memory. There's an interpretation that it's that
actually what you just said. just so I to make the connection. I'm sorry,
Sure,
but
sure.
just to make the connection also because it reminded me of in the conference we were talking about this in Verveki. In the conference in China, we were talking about it. Verveki was making the point of how we need to like these
Embody.
conferences, these in-person gatherings allow us to sync together. So it's like you spoke about the cloud now, and the Torah is something that we can sync together into, and then we go out into the world, and we see that as a continuation. So we work through Torah and through what that enables us to do and what that directs us to do. But then we need to make sure that we keep having those connections. So even if we talk about these, like the conference in China wasn't a one thing and then everybody goes and everybody's happy, because everybody will need to continuously support each other and do those kind of things. So that is kind of like something that was echoed there as well.
Well, very much with the Hagita Yomam V'Layla, right? It's something that you do continuously. Even though this is something I don't participate in, this is definitely something I still support, which is the Daf Hayomi, the daily page of Talmud. And there that's like a 7-year cycle. And then you complete the whole Babylonian Talmud. And recently they finished the cycle a few years ago. They had a whole big shindig in Shea Stadium, I believe.
I can remember that.
Which is, again, it's very prophetic because we're told how, the Talmud talks about how the theaters and circuses of the Gentiles will turn into houses of study, right? So that is obviously like very much like on the nose. But I have a client that every meeting we start, he always starts with the daf. Let me tell you now, my partner is secular completely, right? He just humors him, but he always goes there. Now, I don't do the daf. I guess I'm comfortable enough to discuss with him the thing he's talking about, but he always wants to start his day with sort of syncing up him, me, and then the project of building his house all into like one sort of frame. And that goes back to what you were saying about like, recognizing that it's one. I would say at times it's very forceful. Like I could be like, well, I don't know if there's really a connection between like you being late on a payment and like this thing right over here. But there is an attempt over there to constantly feel connected. And obviously, if you're walking around Israel or you're dealing with Jews, there's a good chance if you meet an Orthodox Jew and bring up, let's say, the daf or the page, you automatically have a conversation that you could be like connects you back into like a flow that is going around. So yes, I'm very pro for Veki's attitude with obviously this regard. Also, forgetting something from your mission, I was just going to say is, in a sense, when we're talking about it as far as let's say this operating system you're using, if you don't have that discernment anymore, then it's very much the rabbis give an example of like a vineyard that no longer has a fence around it, basically, which is forgetting it is not the same as like your vineyard is destroyed, the vineyard being the Torah. Rather, you are now exposed to having issues if you're no longer remembering the system and how it works and how you're supposed to be living your life through it. Again, like I'm saying, it's stressing the difference of if you are learning this as like a subject of like I studied philosophy or I studied like zoology last year, then that's going to be a problem. Okay, we continue.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, the only comment that I have there is like kind of reminds me of Chesterton's fence.
Yeah.
Of like you learn something, but you need to make sure that you understand why it's there to begin with. So that when somebody, maybe you're not going to be the one that asks, what is this fence doing here? But if somebody else is coming to you and says and tells you what is this fence is doing here, and they just break through it. I mean, you can be at the position where you are able to articulate why they shouldn't break through the fence.
Correct. You might find yourself taking apart the fence, even though you didn't want to do that along with other people, just because you weren't aware of what was going on.
Right.
Correct. So that is very much like, in line with like that vineyard idea. Mm-hmm. So we continue over here. Shnei Amar, like we say in Sefer Dvarim. Anyways, it's about talking about your experience in Sinai. So here again, and you could see this as an example, like I was saying earlier, about how the one is referencing the whole Torah in its entirety, because it's using this example over here when you were back in Sinai over here. And again, that was a sense where you're getting over here, even it's 10 commandments, ultimately you're getting here the unit of Torah. From God's utterances all the way till interpretations that Rabbi Akiva has to the conversation we're having today. We see this as a continuous flow. So Rabbi Dostai asks, which makes sense. He's like, 1 second. We just said right now that, like, I forgot one thing. The guy is now forfeiting his life. What's the exact translation over here? If his studies prove, what if one has forgotten because his studies proven too difficult for him, right? So what if that kind of situation? So we have to also try to understand, like, what does that mean? Like someone that it's like too difficult for him to understand. So there's a sense, like we're saying, about going back to the one, that if you are learning the Torah and you are being exposed to it, let's say, and you are now, I hope you don't mind, I'm going to use you as an example right now. Okay, so you're coming and saying, listen, Chezi, I'm going to study with you Pirkei Avot, and I'm doing Bible study here, and I'm doing this book over there, but right now there's still separate pieces.
Yeah.
The reason there's still separate pieces is because I'm still on the journey of unifying them into one. And that is a very difficult and daunting process to do, to push it all back into the sense of it's all one again. And because you have these different ideas and they're pulling you to different directions, and there's different there's different compromises you have to try to understand with the modern world. So all this is very difficult when you're trying to bring it back to the one. And you could argue that during that process, Chezi, if I don't remember this thing we said last week about, like, is that it? Am I forfeiting my life? And the answer would be like, no, because your journey is for unification again. So during that journey, it being too difficult makes sense.
Yeah.
That would be one interpretation, saying, going back to the idea we had about, like, it being one. There's a sense that it's difficult because if you never really understood it the first time, it's very hard to remember. Right. So it's not like that you purposely have forgot it, rather that you've been trying to understand it. It wasn't taught to you well. You weren't focused, but because you didn't understand it well, you couldn't forget it. So again, this is in a certain sense, in classic Chazal form, they come up with an intense statement, but then create a lot of different safeguards to make sure that doesn't actually happen, that quote unquote bad code doesn't promulgate. So you're not killing people left and right. Rather, now we're seeing over here, there's other layers to it. There's obviously a more classic interpretation that what if someone forgets because he's old, because he's sick, because he's reached his mental capacity, right? This person is a great student and he's working very hard, but that's it. That's what his limit is from a cognitive perspective.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Kind of reminds me of the discussion that we had in the book club. And when you were kind of describing me as an example of, like, trying to,
I hope that was okay.
Yeah, no, that's good. But kind of made me thought about trying to figure out how to unify these things, and how to connect them with kind of the modern perspective, for lack of a better word. And what we discussed about the book club was kind of this idea. I think PVK talks about it. Maybe somebody said, gentle slope and steep slope, meaning that Soloveitchik might be more of, or the Litvak kind of idea would be more of a steep slope. Like you have specific ideals and you need to, like, make sure that you do them as well as you can, as opposed to maybe specifically the Chabad idea for a Jew is like, I can come to the synagogue on a Friday night in a car,
Right.
just to begin with, because it's like I do the things that I can do, as well as I'm able to kind of, like, incorporate them into my life. And the move that Chazal is doing here, that the sages are doing here, it seems to be, to me, like something of a hybrid, where I think that's kind of like maybe this is like the synthesis, or this like the compromise here. I don't know if you call it a compromise, but they're posing an ideal of like, do not forget how important each and every single point in the Mishnah is. Let's say, let's take that simple interpretation, and then they give you conditions or kind of like edge cases of how to handle. Okay, if you really can't, so here's a way to move forward, make progress, making all those conditions. So again, it's something that's like they're posing this steep slope of an ideal, and then providing for specific contexts, providing those maybe gentle slopes into that ideal.
Using the slope idea, right? I mean, not that I'm a climber, obviously, but like, there's the slope, obviously, but then there's on the way up on the mountain, while it looks very daunting, and clearly you would tell someone like this is like a vertical climb, there are little posts up across the mountain where other people have already put in their support, things to grab your thing on, and if you go up over here on this line, there's so yes, I think that's a good analogy.
Yeah, and on the mountain, also on the way to the mountain, that makes me think about climbing as well. There are things that you can do specifically. There are ways that you can get to the top that you can do better than other people. If you're tall, then you can go a certain route where, there is a higher kind of like where you need to grab something, but because you're taller, you can do that. But if you're somebody that's like has a good other physical ability, like to jump from place to place, then you can maybe do that. So there's to each kind of like to each his own. I mean, what is the quote? Teach a boy according to his.
Oh, to each according to their. Oh, now I'm blanking out of it as well.
Well, no, I mean,
you're talking about it Hebrew.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but yes, obviously we learned that from Jacob and Esau. We asked like, how did they have such a completely different how their trajectory is so different, and the attitude is that their father did them a disservice raising them the same way, and rather there should have been like each one should have had their own own personal touch, which because every kid is an individual and everyone's very different, there really is needs to see where certain kids shine, and certain individuals or adults, obviously, like you were saying, where I could jump higher, where I could run, where I could utilize my skills in a better fashion. And we also mentioned that in the last few Mishnayot about Ata v'shelcha shelo, when we were saying that you and yours, and there was an interpretation over there that you should be giving God from your skills. And like you as an individual, there's some people that could praise God in singing and speaking, and there's some that could do that in dancing, and there's some could do that through medicine. But like obviously utilize your skill to praise God. I see from here, from the cloud of Babylon, steep slope, flipping out, gentle slope, Chabad. All right. Okay. So when we were talking about Yochalafiu Takfalav Mishnato, right, we gave that explanation about what if he's old, he doesn't remember, and the other examples we gave. Talmud Lamar, so we learn Upen Yasuru Milvacha Kol Yamei Chayecha. Hai no mitchayev benafsho ad sheishev yesiram melibo. And in English, unless they be removed from your heart. So here we're basically focusing on the intentionality of it. So when are we saying that you are really forfeiting your life? When someone is aware that he's intentionally trying to forget something. So I don't know how many people that sit down and like intentionally work on forgetting things that they know. So I think a better interpretation would be that that, like, for example, if you studied something not well the first time and you're not asking a question, then you're ignoring the fact that you're not going to remember this. Like you're ignoring the fact that you're not doing this in a proper manner. Or if someone invited you to class and you come like they're an hour late and you don't really like, if you're putting yourself in situations where are clearly going to be less than ideal, arguably you could say that is an intentional situation you're putting yourself in to forget these things. Yeah. And obviously that there at that point there is it's a serious transgression when you're actively making making yourself aware of the fact that you're not going to be able to remember these things. There's another sense over here, like on a deeper level, which we look at the wording over here, and we said earlier about the making the blessing on the tree. If you're learning achi afsik, okay, so here too you have a sense of sitting, and we know about when the Bible talks about Jacob sitting, Vayishev Yaakov, and the interpretation of that is Bikesh Yaakov lashev b'shalva. It says when Jacob was sitting, and the sages say Jacob wanted to just sit and be like leave me alone. I want to live in peace, and I don't want to be dealing with these adventures my father and forefather was going on. And the answer is if you're stopping, if there's not movement, if there's not a constant connection to this flow, that's where the severing happens. So here too, that attitude is if you're not forfeiting your soul until you stop and sit, or until you created that sever, and you were aware of the fact that you're creating that disconnect between you and God. And just another focus on the words over here, and it says veyasirem, and in English it says that he deliberately removes them. Right. So earlier we said if you forget one thing, and now we're saying veyasirem elibo, and you're forgetting them is plural. Mm-hmm. So this is sort of the opposite of what we were saying earlier, that if you are trying to take the one and split it into the many, then that's also a problem. Because we were saying the difficulty that we're giving you a pass on is if you are someone that's recognized the many and is trying to unify. But if you are deciding to take the unity and fragment it, then obviously that's a problem.
Interesting.
But please let me know if you have any thoughts.
I don't know. I think I kind of covered my thoughts and questions
on this one.
You've exhausted me in this specific.
I've exhausted you. All right. Okay, so let's
from the sense of not tired.
I got you. Can you scroll down?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Rabbi Chanina Ben Dosa. So again, this is the second one, Rabbi Chanina Ben Dosa. Omer, kol shirat cheto kodemet lechokmato, chokmato mitkayemet. V'chol shechokmato kodemet lirat cheto, en chokmato mitkayemet. Rabbi Chanina, the son of Dosa, would say, one whose fear of sin takes precedence to his wisdom endures. But one whose wisdom takes precedence to his fear of sin, his wisdom does not endure. Okay. So, this is Rabbi Chanina Ben Dosa, son of him. But so Rabbi Chanina is also a guy from the Second Temple, a sage from the Second Temple. Not a guy. I'm sorry, he's not my friend. He's a revered rabbi from the Second Temple. He was a chassid, a very loving man as well. He was known to have, is it Rabbi Chanina Ben Dosa? Yeah. Gifted in prayer, so magical abilities, so to speak, as in when his prayers come true. We see this as, let's say, a super-oriented man. Jordan Peterson once gave an example. He's like, what if there's someone that is completely, fully oriented? What can that guy do, right? So he was a student of YBZ, or Yochanan Ben Zakkai, the heavy hitter. Rabbi Yochanan even asked him to pray for him, so he was legit. And the example they give is he is like the servant of the king, but because he's the servant of the king, he still recognizes the king, and that's why a servant is sometimes allowed to ask for things as well. So he was at such a high level that he could do these things. They actually had some miraculous things that obviously they resemble Jesus in a sense, where there's the whole sense with Jesus where he took the bread and made a tremendous amount of bread for people. So Rabbi Chanina Ben Dosa did that with this old woman's house, or he took some sticks and he built a whole house for her, and he took water that she had and lit a candle on it, and it burnt for all Shabbat like it was oil. So you could see some similarities over there. He got rid of Shedim. He was known of doing that as well, bad spirits. That's it on Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. I think he had. I'm trying to remember if he had this famous story with. No, I don't think that's relevant to him. Okay, so
man full of talents.
A man full of talents. Yeah, he was actually very, very poor, which makes you wonder why he didn't use his magic to just give himself money. But I'm not judging. Okay. Kol shirat cheto kodemet lechochmato. Right. So this obviously reminds us of Reshit Chochma Yirat Hashem. Right. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. The fear of God and the fear of sin. These are similar in a certain sense, basically, because sin is again connecting to not the interpretation, and we've said this in previously, not the interpretation of I am fearful of God that he's going to punish me if I sin, rather that I'm fearful because I love God so much. I'm fearful that if I sin, I am damaging our relationship. Right, so it's more of a positive sort of attitude towards it.
Wait, so let me ask you something.
Sure.
This is a whole discussion in itself, I know. So maybe we need to schedule something. But just because this came up in a conversation with my friend as well. But you just mentioned that the fear here is not because of the punishment, or maybe the specific view. It's not because of the punishment. It's because you're severing a tie to somebody you love, but isn't. I mean, if we think about the Rambam, I think, and in the Shema, it says there's this punishment and reward aspect that is very important. So aren't we all also just afraid of aware of the reward that comes with mitzvah and the punishment that comes from sin? And how so?
Yes and no, because
that's what I expected by now.
So we also learn that you're not doing something lo menat lekabel pras, right? You're not doing it to get the reward. You're doing it for the connection. So even if you know that you're doing the good deeds, the idea is don't focus on the reward that you might get now in the world to come. Don't make those calculations. And Chazal are also very sensitive about that, not going around making those calculations. And we obviously, we have the big issue of Job. Right. And Sadiq Veralo, how does the righteous, suffer? So these are all things in a certain way that are all connected. But I think it's more about recognizing that the devastation that could happen, so to speak, from you not following in God's footsteps, where we have you're not going to get water on your land and many other issues. That is I must believe HaTorah dibra b'lashon bnei Adam. It's talking to its people at its generation, so it's putting into a certain context. That's number one.
Yeah,
it's very important to remember that. Number two, it's making sure that people recognize that everything around you, right? That God, unlike the other gods around you, he is the God of the heavens and the earth and the water and the fire and the whole shebang. So it's fully encompassing. So if you're looking at it from a micro perspective, if you do good things will happen. Bad things will happen. From a macro perspective, it's as far as the human race, right? We've already had things were not going well, like we just had in the last week's portion. And God completely destroys everything. And there's a sense which is we're starting this again, and I'm just using the eulogy, the example of the keshet, of the rainbow. So earlier, God is using his bow, his actual bow and arrow on us, and he's shooting arrows to his earth, and he's destroying earth. There's the most intense a punishment from God, a full destruction. Mm-hmm. On the flip side, once that's over, right, God comes and says, I'm going to flip that bow around right now, and I'm now only going to have the same symbolism of this bow, but it's going to be a bow of peace. Yeah. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be sin, there's not going to be punishment anymore, but God is sort of, in a certain way, telling you, you can't be living your life thinking it's going to be devastated immediately. And that's also sort of the promise to Noach and to his sons. He's like, there's going to be cycles. The life is not going to start. Dvarim lo yishbatu. There's at no point. At no point are you going to be out of this rat race, so to speak. Right. And for that, you need to have stability. So if you are going to be living your life also from the fear of sin, just as far as if I do this, then I'm going to get punished. Just on that level, it's also very, very. It's sort of it's very limiting. It's a very limiting mode of being.
It's limiting, and there's recognition that you said, like, we don't have the power to look at the macro. It's like we're limited in our prediction powers, and we're limited in how we can do those things. So it's, yeah.
So there's a sense which is like, I mean, we're mentioning this earlier, but that wisdom in a certain sense is also, it's when I'm using wisdom here as far as like the chokhmah, if you're going to go with wisdom first, it seems like if before wisdom, you're just like this little dot, right? But as you gain more wisdom, right, your dot expands, so to speak, in this analogy, right? It gets wider. You're gaining more and more knowledge. In a certain sense, though, that sort of shields you from the divine flow. You've created like this sense when we've also spoke about the Yordea Merkava, the descendants of the chariots, and why they call the descendants, because they're leaving from your vantage point, from your point of view, which is like this highest point as far as you're considered. So the more wisdom you accumulate that's devoid of the fear of God, and by that I mean, like, again, understanding, putting your priorities in check and your connection to God first, then that wisdom in a certain sense could
overreach.
It's not only overreach. Now the flow is making its way towards you, but you already are too much in this thinky talky land that you are being shielded from this flow in a certain sense. And yirah, not as far as fear, but yirah is the place of acceptance. Okay, that allows for an openness. And if you're open, then that allows or in Kabbalistic term, the Ein Sof to go through you. You're never going to reach the Ein Sof. Yeah. However, you could allow the Ein Sof to completely move through you constantly if you're open to it. And we mentioned this also when we said Modeh Ani, the blessing we say in the morning. Because who are you even to think about yourself as an individual on this point? Because you're nothing, right? We're a little dot. There's the whole cosmos out there. But once you recognize the Ani, when you say Modeh Ani, once you recognize yourself as seen by God, and to do so, you need to do so through yirah, through the fear of God. That allows you to now see yourself in a certain sense and be open to having a relationship with God. But it requires you first to recognize yourself as subject to God before having your whole wisdom conversation.
Yeah, very interesting. I think you kind of gave me a visual. I had a vision of what you were saying in terms of like the fear being. If I think about it, almost in terms of goal setting or problem solving, which is kind of like things that I do kind of as part of my profession. So, if I think about it, like if you try to set a goal and you make it, and you have no context of what's around, you have no context of any kind of constraints, right? Then you're gonna sense what you're doing. If you're spreading yourself too wide, you're not. That's what I was saying in terms of overreach. You might kind of like expand to a point where actually you're not able to go. But if you define your constraints, if you define your context before that, and that's I think what Viveki also talks about in terms of enabling constraints, then you are able to kind of have the right boundaries from within you can kind of expand towards them. So it prevents that overreach.
So, like we're saying that, like basically, like the wisdom is not like, we're not only talking about like the intellectual knowledge, but it's also like how you apply that knowledge that you know in like a moral and ethical way. So like it's to fear God is allowing you to like encompass the ability to make like the wise and like righteous choice based on your understanding of, let's say, the Jewish teaching, right? So you are empowering your wisdom at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm saying it's layered on top of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so ultimately, when he does all that, and we said that the kol shechochmato, the kol shechochmato kodemet liyiratcheto. Hey, did we just read that one or no?
Kol shechochmato.
No, sorry, we didn't read that one.
We didn't
Sorry. We just read the first one. So chochmato mitkayemet. We should also talk about what chochmato mitkayemet means. That like the wisdom endures. So first, obviously, that like it endures, like we said about the operating system, it works well. Mm-hmm. If you have a system and you've integrated these two things, so just very clearly, like then that's a system that has proven itself, that works well, that allows you to sort of move forward properly. It also like it allows you, like we said again in Kabbalistic terms, it allows you mitkayemet, it allows you to become a proper vessel that could receive the wisdom, and it also is showing that like it's if someone is deciding to purposely connect his morality and his wisdom together, there's a sense that ultimately that will, his knowledge and appreciation of God will strengthen over time.
Yeah.
The kol shechochmato kodemet liyirat cheto en chochmato mitkayemet. So, but one whose wisdom takes precedence to his fear of sin, his wisdom does not endure. So it's obviously the flip side over here. If you're just engaging from like an intellectual matter, like devoid of like the human experience, you're not going to be able to like have like a proper wisdom over here. And obviously, as far as the Torah is concerned, it's giving you its interpretation of like, the human story and the human condition. So you're looking at the human experience through that. But ultimately, this and even what we're going to say in Pirkei Avot over here is talking about embodying as well.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if this was what you were talking about as well, but there is something about when you construct your understanding of, let's call it belief, when you're constructing your beliefs, but we can assume that with your beliefs come behaviors, right? How do you interact with the community, the things that you do day to day? If you're constructing your beliefs through, let's say, rationality, so maybe let's say chokhmah here is also synonymous to rationality, then in certain conditions, you would be in a position where your rationality can break apart that understanding very easily, and then it doesn't last.
That's like we said about that ring of wisdom that you have.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but so I guess it's
that shield of wisdom, but like a shield in the negative sense.
A shield in a negative sense.
When I was saying like you start off with a dot, and as you learn more and more wisdom, that dot expands. But as that dot expands, it's very hard for you then to you're having this other interpretation. You're having this other experience through we were talking what we called, let's say, the fear of God or the fear of sin, right? But now you have this whole force field that you've built already that is not allowing that flow necessarily to come in as easily, because like you just said, you're living solely through this rational mindset, and now is a priority.
So what I was saying, I think it's different, and it's just, I don't think I spoke with you, so that's why I'm mentioning is that you can view you can think that by being a part of a religious community, for example, this is your belief, this is your chokhmah, so you're not fearful of the sin. You're constructing you want to participate in a community because it has a utility for you. You can go there with your family and you meet people and you have friends and maybe you sing, you do those things, and it has utility. But if your community becomes a place where there's more fear, there's more strife than love and singing, then rationally you can think, well, this community doesn't give me the utility that I need, hence I don't need to be a part of it. There's nothing beyond that. Like it's not about any kind of connection that I want to make with God or anything beyond that rational idea of what's the utilitarian idea. So that was kind of what I was thinking about. I think it was maybe it's
Yeah, no, that's different than what I was saying. I hear what you're saying now. I got you.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll continue with number 10, Yud. Hu haya omer. We're continuing with Rav Chanina over here. Kol shema'asav merubin mechochmato, chochmato mitkayemet. Kol shechochmato meruba mema'asav, en chochmato mitkayemet. It continues, hu haya omer, kol sheruach habriyot nocha himeno, ruach hamakom nocha himeno, וכol she'en ruach habriyot nocha himeno, en ruach hamakom nocha himeno. Rabbi Dosa ben Herkinis אומר, שנה של שחרית ויין של צהריים ושיחת הילדים בישיבת בתי כנסיות של עמי ארץ מוציאים את האדם מן העולם. So this is a long one. Let's split it up to a few sections. If you don't mind scrolling back up to the beginning, I just want to translate it to English. He would also say, one whose deeds exceed his wisdom endures. But one whose wisdom exceeds his deeds, his wisdom do not endure. So right. Like we were saying earlier, obviously, that it's obviously wisdom alone is not sufficient. We're talking about it needs to be applied for them to having any lasting value. And like what we say constantly, like to remember, or like Grim Gris says, remember, embody, to remember to embody these things that we're actually learning. And this brings up a famous discussion in the Talmud about what's greater. Is it Talmud Torah? Is it the study of Torah, or is it the actions themselves? And ultimately, we end up saying that Gadol Talmud Shemavili Damase, right? It's the study is great because it brings you to doing deeds. But then again, there's still a question about is it actual the study? Because we were just still saying that the study is more important, even though it's bringing to deeds. So what's the actual hierarchy? A good example of this would be, let's say, if you asked Aristotle if he was reading the Bible, what his favorite book was, it would be Genesis, right? Like how, why, how do these things happen? Give me the wisdom. Mm-hmm. Ironically, Rashi on the first verse of Genesis says, why are we even starting here? We should have been started on this specific law about, about,
or something, right?
Exactly. And there you can see the differences, because Rashi is saying, yes, I care about the wisdom, but I only care about it because ultimately it brings me to doing the deeds, which have intricacies, and that's what I want to see on the ground. Give me the actual acts. Mm-hmm. Forget the wisdom. And there's a sense where we run after wisdom and don't, we live in the thinky-talky land, but on the ground, don't go and do these things. So I think that would be a good example. And I guess Aristotle will forgive me if he was more excited, was more interested in.
Maybe he wanted to know about what to bless on the beginning of the month. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's, I don't know. Obviously, I don't want to be I don't want to be coming down I don't want to sound like I'm coming down on wisdom over here. But it's all about the pairing with the ethical, with the moral. At the same time, that's what these Mishnayot are stressing to us over here, that it can't just be in a vacuum, that there's just someone that has tremendous amount of wisdom, but that's not actually manifesting itself on the ground. And as far as Judaism is concerned, that only manifests itself via your priority of fear of God first, which again should lead you, if you are studying the Torah properly, it should ultimately lead you to leave the study hall and do the deeds.
Yeah. And I mean, it talks about here, it seems like it's talking about, it's not disregarding wisdom. It's talking about a certain balance, right? Just
right.
Make sure that you have deeds that exceed your wisdom, so that it's almost like you're recharging, so that you can kind of practice the wisdom that you've put in. And also the fact that it said that the small thing, the fact that it says the wisdom endures, means that it's important for them that wisdom does endure. So obviously it's an important aspect.
Right. So it not only is it an important aspect, like those that wisdom of yours, we're interested for it to stay, and it's also a little more difficult to change someone's mind with regards to wisdom. But like through repetition, deeds could, like, you could make a conscious effort with that regard and really create change. So like there's also like a stress on saying, again, like, even if your wisdom that potentially requires tweaking, that could be done through the process of acting properly as well.
Right.
Obviously, like you need, like, you could notice over here that we were talking about the difference here of here in Yud over here we have his whose deeds, and on the other one we had, if you could scroll up for a second.
This one?
Here we're talking about the Yirat Chet. So we're talking about Chataim and deeds again. So again, it's in the sense of the fear of God or the fear of sin is not something I could really see. So this was more of like a personal kind of conversation. And then the next line over here is saying, but ultimately, like, what the people see are the deeds. And that's like where the focus needs to be, because that's, as a society, that's like where we could judge.
Interesting, yeah. So okay. It takes it down level.
Right.
In a way. Yeah.
As the sages like to do. He would also say, one who is pleasing to his fellow man is pleasing to God. But one who is not pleasing to his fellow man is not pleasing to God. So this obviously is putting us, like, sort of like, if we earlier had this conversation, like you were just saying, they're bringing it down. So we're seeing over here, there's 3 different relationships that one has with God, which is Ben Adam LaMakom, Ben Adam LaChavero, Ben Adam LaAtzmo, right? We have our relationship between us to God, us to our individual, and us to ourselves. And what we just read through were 3 of these different options, basically. We had one between us and God, like we just said, one with our fellow man, what we're seeing over here right now, and one which is inherently thinking about yourself, right? Like your own, I'm just stressing again. I see that sounded confusing. Stressing the 3 of them. We just said right now, one who's pleasing to his fellow man, right? So that's Ben Adam le Chavero. And we have Ben Adam le Makom. We were talking about the fear of God, right? And then we had Ben Adam Latzma, which was about doing these good deeds, basically, which are building your own fortitude personally. And I should just mention over here as well, like, that this whole delineation that they're doing over here is something that Chazal talks about, the sages talk about a lot. But there's a famous discussion, which is what is the most important verse in the Bible, and one gives V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, right? Love your neighbor as yourself, and one says that he gives this specific, more intricate verse, which has to do with one's relationship with God and keeping commandments. And then one is this Sefer Toldot Adam. This is the book of man. And the sense is that eventually, once we left Eden, once we transgressed over there with God, the only place we could see God now is through the other. Like we were told about Moses, that he saw God face to face, like one sees his fellow man. That's where that connection happens right now at this level of the game. Eventually, in the world to come, there's a sense where you will be able to see God already within yourself. We will be comfortable with ourselves and be able to see the image. We'll be able to look inward and recognize that even in us, God is there. Right now, it's hard for us to still do that. We have to look at the other to be able to see that, but eventually we'll be able to do that as well. So I'm just giving that's like as a general context as we're going through this. But I think in general, this is trying to like also constantly bring us back from these philosophical and theological conversations that are happening in the middle of the night and bring us down to the neighborhood, going all the way back to the people that we brought back into the house right now. So you're going to be walking around people, and these people ultimately are the ones that are going to be seeing you and interacting with you. And these people, if you're acting properly and people see that as well, not only is that glorifying God's name, because ideally you're acting in a proper way, and that's elevating you and the neighborhood, but that's ultimately where people get to see that fully embodied, right? Are you a man of integrity? Are you acting properly? Do people want to have you as part of their community as well?
Yeah, it's interesting, and there's a few places that I feel like emphasis make this connection between your behavior towards other people and your behavior with God. So there's another. I don't think we passed it yet, but I forget the quote. But where it says, "If you hate people, you hate God, and if you hate God, you hate people." Which really hit me when I first read it. Like if you, sonnet makom.
Yeah.
It really hit me.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the word for like people hater in English? There's a word for it. I forgot the word for it.
A people hater?
Yeah, it's like this term.
Self-loathing?
No, it's I forgot. And through NT something. Anyway,
someone in the PLN gallery will hook us up.
Yeah, maybe, hopefully. But anyway, I feel like that is, and I'm talking like from just my own position. It's so easy to misanthrope. That's what it is, misanthrope. It's so easy to kind of like hold that perspective, and with this kind of like, I guess it's sort of like this cynicism, because obviously you're a person, and you can make jokes on like how you don't trust people and you don't trust yourself. And I think that this is kind of like a trendy perspective from where you can make various jokes and comedy. Which, sure, comedy is nice, but when they said that specifically, it kind of, even though it's like a simple equation, it kind of hit me and made me think about how holding that kind of perspective, even from a comedic, just like trying to make jokes, like how it could be harmful. So, or what can it do to you if you don't notice that you're holding that position and what it means? So when we'll get there, we'll probably talk about it more. But here it also says something about that. So I thought it would be useful to mention it.
Thank you. Okay, the kol she'en ruach habriot nochai menu en ruach hamakom nochai menu as well. So obviously, if you're not being a chill dude, ultimately God's not happy with that kind of behavior. Mm-hmm. Rabbi Dosa ben Hyrcanus Omer. Rabbi Dosa, the son of Hyrcanus, would say, morning sleep, noontime wine, children's talk, and sitting at a meeting place of the ignoramus drive a person from the world. So this Rabbi Dosa happened to actually be like quite rich, and just because I mentioned the last guy was poor, and he wasn't part of the Yavne crew, but he was respected regardless. He was respected also by the other rabbis, and he respected them, but he was considered like an outsider, like an independent rabbi, an independent agent. Mm-hmm. He did his own thing. And he has a famous story where his study partner, Rabbi Yoshua, had an argument with Rabbi Gamliel, and Rabbi Gamliel tells him, no, like, you're going to go according to me, and you're going to come to me on the day that you consider to be Yom Kippur with a stick and money in your pocket, and to show that you are accepting the yoke of, like, of Rabbi Gamliel, basically, and his decree. And and the rabbi suggests him, tells him he should do so. He should listen to Rabbi Gamliel and do so. That's just a little something to take into consideration. Okay, so we're saying over here three different things. Shena shel shacharit v'yain shel tzorayim v'sichat hayeladim. So the morning sleep is talking about the fact that you're not there for prayer. That's what you'd be missing if you're obviously if you're oversleeping, right? So they had bums already then, and so that Rav Shirky says that there's a difference over here between Ashkenazi and Sephardi Jews, because the Ashkenazi Jews, their focus is really studying, and the prayer is sort of something that you do because you need to. And with the Sephardim, it's usually the prayer is what it's all about, and like, yeah, we'll get to the studying later. And that is sort of what you have more of in the more Ashkenazi circles, like, give me the fastest, quickest prayer group so I could just get done with this and get back to learning. And in the Sephardi group is going to be like, it's okay if we miss the learning right now because we're all still chanting Song of Songs, all of us together out loud for like the 7th time. So obviously these are things that also have to do with like focuses, and like in general, it's a mistake on both sides that they focus, like we were talking about this earlier, that they create them into separate pieces and don't see them all as uniform. And all these things have to be happening together, which is generally the way even we do this class, which I believe in, or this not class, the study group, where I believe in reading the text through all the interpretations simultaneously and not through like one specific viewpoint.
Right.
Now, the wine, obviously, which I like over here, which talks about noontime wine, because it's saying like if you're gonna drink and you wanna like chill, do so at night. But if you're just like getting hammered in the middle of the day, obviously, it's very clear that that's not going to be appropriate. That like I also think that even the children's talk over here, it's like a double-edged sword. Once it's a dig at the guy doing it, which is saying like you're going into a pointless conversation.
Yeah.
You would have with a child. On the flip side, you could look at it as like parents, which is don't let your children's talk be nothingness. It's like, you should already invest in your own children when you're having conversation with them, that their children talk isn't nonsense Peppa Pig children talk, but rather there's somewhere you could actually go with this, or there's some meaning, or it's grounded somewhere. Also, 3 of these things, even the one we didn't fully go over, which is just like the meeting place, which you can see that the Chazal is always talking about timing and measurements. These are things that have no time limit, right? Like the morning sleep is to show that basically like you went to sleep at night and like there was no set time to when it ends, right? Yeah. We know that the Torah talks about like when's the right time to say the Shema. You have to be very time sensitive. But if someone is feeling that he's sleeping leisurely, that clearly someone is not wrapping himself through the idea of like this time limit. Same thing with like the noontime wine, which is like you're just allowing yourself to just procrastinate and be lost in this sense of nothingness when you should actually have a fairly regimented schedule. And we know that when we're already saying in all the previous chapters that we read, how you have to create a schedule for your life and you have to be building the system, which is quite intense.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Bazani. It's good to see you, sir. Obviously, just like on the most basic level, like this is like deadbeat behavior that could like lead you to like, and actually ending your life. Like it won't lead anywhere too good.
Yeah, ending your life, or like motzi, drive a person from the world. I like that translation too. Like,
well, so I think this is before we said mitchayev ben nafsho, forfeiting his life, and here it says we're driving a person from this world.
Motzi, yeah.
I think here it's sort of a culmination of what we said earlier, which is this guy's not doing the deeds because he's passed out or he's drinking or he's just chilling. He's not studying wisdom because we're just seeing over here what he's doing with his time right now. He's just oversleeping. He's noontime wine and he's having meaningless conversations. So earlier we were talking about like have more fear of God than wisdom, but we still want wisdom. And then we said like wisdom's important, but we also want deeds. Here it's saying, but if you don't have any of those deeds or those wisdoms, I'm not even talking about like the hierarchy of them, you will ultimately end up being driven from this world because right. you no longer have a relationship to, there's nothing grounding you with regards to your relationship with God. There's nothing giving you sort of, not context. There's nothing, you don't have those wisdom goggles to put on to now discern through these things. And there's no schedule. There's no rhythm which will allow you to be productive.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it talks about, it's almost like a person that, kind of like what we said with the person that doesn't take advantage of like the leisure time, that when they wake up in the middle of the night and it's like suddenly they can be productive. Here also there's something about not realizing the potential of each one of these things. So like even sleep has potential in it, but the morning has something that you can do something in the morning, both in terms of deed and wisdom and learning, let's say, right? The noontime wine, the wine itself can be something that's full of potential. But
the wine, which connects to, let's say, you drink wine, secrets come out. That is supposed to be happening. Like, noon is like high noon, right? It's the thicket of the day. You're drinking an elixir that's slowing you down. That's not the right time to be doing that slowing down.
Right. Even though it has the potential for something.
Talk is for the adults. The children are not having that. And even the meeting place, in Hebrew, it's batei knesiot, but it doesn't mean synagogues. It means just gathering places. But in the meeting place, you'd be like, we're here to have a meeting. But ultimately, I'm having with ignoramuses. And what we just said in the previous portions, where we're saying, like, does God, is the divine presence there even between two people, between five people, between a group of 10? But in all of those, we were saying that the focus is the study of Torah, or there is, it's not a whole lecture, but still that is what's sustaining the conversation. Here, you're being told, like you just said, that you have these opposites sort of that you're trying to pair together that ultimately leave you empty-handed.
Yeah.
I think we'll end here.
Yeah, we are at 11, Yud Aleph.
Yud Aleph, fantastic. So we need like 3 a week, like 5 months, and we'll be done. Not good pace. I'm not complaining. I'm happy. All right. Thank you all for participating. I might have I'm going to check right now as I'm still talking to you. I might be having a conversation with Schlief, who's on Jacob's thing. We're going to be talking about Israel. I don't know if we're streaming or not, but if we are, you guys will see it. Either way, have a great week, all. Cool. Keep on keeping on. Stay safe. Hug your children.
Thank you, Chezi. Stay safe. Appreciate it.